Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Tim Olson, co-founder and managing partner of Aspire Finance. Thanks for joining me, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's glad to have you on the program. Man, I'm excited to learn more about your career and more importantly, dig into your newest venture, Aspire Finance.
I love it. Let's do it.
Tim, for the people who haven't had a chance to meet you, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and career to date in equipment finance?
Yeah. So in 2012, I got introduced by my roommate at the time, post college, to US Bank. And I didn't know what business banking was, history major, coaching minor. And I was actually on the fence about moving to California, where I was born. This was while I was in Minnesota. He's like, well, if just apply for the job. If you get it, you can stay. And so I applied for a business banking job with US Bank, got that job, worked there for about 4.5 years. And at that time, recruiter started reaching out and was chatting with other banks, community banks, trying to go a little down market from US Bank and get more experience. When I was introduced to a great regional equipment finance company, Water Street Funding. And from there, I took the opportunity in 2017, I think that summer, to jump from US Bank and go work with the company that had, I think, 5 of us total. So, and since then, I haven't really turned away. So,
Fantastic. And then, were you up near Marshall? Or were you always in the cities?
I was always in the city. So on the business banking side, I was like, if you think of a traditional business banker, I was working with companies and facilitating their deposit accounts, their treasury, their
Okay. Got
equipment loans, smaller real estate loans. So I did that in St. Paul for 3 years. And then I actually moved out to California with my wife, and I was out there for a while. And then we moved back for family, right? Why are you from
Okay.
Minnesota?
Okay.
Family. So,
Yeah.
um, and was, yeah, with US Bank until, yeah, that 2017 summer.
Okay. Okay. And while you were at US Bank, did you ever hear of equipment finance or then when people just needed some business loans for machinery?
Yeah, I worked with them from time to time. We called it small ticket. Usually,
Okay.
I was on that business revenue of 10 million and below. So my clients were looking at getting equipment that was typically 250,000 or less. So I had it from time to time for sure, Jesse. And that's primarily what intrigued me was after speaking with a number of community banks to regional banks to large banks when I was looking at like moving and trying to accelerate my career per se, that equipment piece intrigued me because it was like one piece to the puzzle, right? And I
Sure.
could
Sure.
facilitate quite a few companies through multiple relationships with a plethora of banks. So,
The majority of the time, that's business essential equipment that they need to
yeah,
have. So
yeah, it's revenue
strength.
producing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And then when you went to, was it Water Street? Is that what you said?
yeah.
Were,
Mhm.
were you in a sales role?
Yeah, so I always remember it. One of the owners there just said, "Hey, here's a laptop. Go build a book of business." Like I don't know what that means. What do you mean? U.S. Bank, everyone just walks in the door, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's
hey
like,
Tim, I got $10 million company. I need a
here's
million
what you
bucks.
do.
Okay, cool.
Do
Versus
you
the
have
other
a
way, and
do you have a lead list for me?
yeah, nothing, no. And also too, I was targeting different prospects per se, right? So at the bank, U.S. Bank, with incoming business opportunities, I did some like BNI networking and stuff like that. But aside from that, it was more just servicing incoming leads when I was building out a center of influence or COI book of business with fellow bankers at that time. Now I'm prospecting bankers and CPAs and service providers that touch and provide service to those small to middle market companies. So
That
yeah,
was my
that's
that
cool.
was my first job in equipment finance. We have one client, go find more.
Yep. Yep.
What?
Simple.
Uh, yeah, except for like being a service provider, like 80% of who you call are just brokers that don't even need
Right.
the widget that you're doing. So it can be
Yeah.
frustrating for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
Perseverance
definitely.
pays off, man.
It does. Yeah, you got to have a lot of conversations till you find the right folks. And then once you find the right folks, right, your circle gets a little tighter, right? Because you only have
Yeah,
so many referrals to share typically.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, do you mind just kind of introducing Aspire Finance?
Yeah. So Aspire Finance, speaking of the equipment industry, so I was looking to take a step away from the equipment industry recently this summer, and things were going great with my previous company, Honor Capital, but just felt like I wanted to control more of my path and my family's destiny, as well as my ability to, what I financially earn, right? And while having a conversation with a friend of mine from South Carolina, she challenged me. She's like asking me all these questions about equipment finance. How do you do a company? How do you start it? How do you make money in it? How do you service it? Why would someone work with a non-bank lender? And after the call, I really took a step back, Jesse, and I was like, man, I know a lot more about the industry than I realized, right? And I think a lot of people have that opportunity to take a step back, share with someone that knows nothing about your industry, everything you know, and then you're like, wow, gives you an appreciation, right? So after having that conversation with Kelly, like I said, she challenged me. She's like, Tim, think bigger, right? Let's start an equipment finance company. So that we did. So we started that at the end of summer, right around Labor Day, is when we got the ball rolling. And the reason I started Aspire Financial is not just from the financial, you know, capabilities that I hope it produces, but more so like the direction of the company building out a company, right? Not buying a company, but building it out even. You see a lot of success stories doing that where you can control the culture better, you can control the environment, the people, you can control the yeses and the nos as far as when it comes to deals, right? Because you know better than most people that there's a lot of deals out there. There's a lot of need for capital that banks just can't or don't want to facilitate. So it provides opportunity for non-bank lenders like Aspire Finance and others. And it's just how do we service that? How do we differentiate ourselves and not be a money over money shop, right? We're not going to be the cheapest in town, but we're not going to be the most expensive by any means either. So and what I'm excited about is just starting it based off of transparency in relationship building, right? Like, let's do a deal together with the idea to do multiple deals together, right? Like, I don't want to just concentrate on one deal and then go to a different prospect, right? I want to go deep with the relationship and wide.
And you probably saw that a lot at Honor with what
Yeah,
Brian and Shay built and how
yeah,
relationship driven that organization was, and
100%.
servant based
Yeah,
leadership, and just,
yep.
yeah, yeah, good guys.
No, no, they walk the walk. It's fantastic what they've built, and I commend them, especially during COVID, right? What a great time to start. But they built a hell of a shop there, and really great guys and great company. I thought I was going to go buy a business and manufacturing company or something when I stepped away, and then this came up, and then I pivoted back to equipment finance. So, um, yeah, what
Yeah,
do you do? God
yeah,
just
this,
presents you opportunities, and you say yes or no, or you don't even see them, right?
and what did the missus think when you were like, hey,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do this?
yeah, great question. Been married for celebrated 9 years this year, so no
Congratulations.
no kids yet. I think that definitely helped in the decision part. Like, hey, if we want to take on risk, like this is the time, right? Versus if there's another mouth to feed later on in our life, then it changes your risk tolerance, right? So,
Sure, sure.
um, but no, she was very supportive. Um, Everyone's compensation is different in the equipment finance world. I chose to have mine be 100% commission paid. So I was already kind of floating that line to an extent.
Okay.
Um, so when I just added that up as well as other factors at the end of the day too, I'm a very like entrepreneur skin. Like my father had his own business, my grandfather had his own business. And I just
Okay.
thought, what better way to control the controllables? And that's your production and the people that know you and your reputation. And yeah, it's been really cool to see the amount of support. I mean, not just from my wife, most importantly, but also from my network, just like kudos, right? So
No, it's fantastic. When I saw the announcement, I think I tried to reach out as quickly as I saw it,
you
congratulate
did.
you,
Yeah, you're one of the first.
even though our paths probably only crossed maybe a handful of times, but still, when you see a younger individual in this space going and putting it on themselves.
Mhm.
That's what you're doing. You're betting on
Yeah,
yourself and to
yeah,
perform, and you're going to do whatever it takes. And that was a leap I took a couple of years ago, because I was tired of being a number.
yeah,
And it's like, no, I can go do this. I know I have it.
yeah.
Let's rock and roll.
Right, right. Yeah, totally agreed. And being a number, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, like I was a number at Honor Capital, but I was treated very well, right? You're treated very greatly. There's nothing wrong with that. But I always, I don't know, it just kind of sticks with me. A long time ago, I read a quote somewhere where it's like, oh, it's Ed Milet, actually. You probably know Ed Milet.
Mhm,
A lot of people
mhm.
listen to his stuff, but he was like, his biggest fear is on his deathbed, seeing who he could have been standing over him, right? Like I love fitness. I love fitness and physical activities because I think, well, I know it really pushes you into the uncomfortable, right? And like growth really starts in uncomfortable spaces. And if you don't put yourself in that uncomfortable space, it's hard to grow, necessary to an extent.
One of the biggest challenges, though, it's like, well, who's going to end up doing that? The answer is you.
Yeah, yeah. Or, dude, this was actually a driver of it too. I mean, this book, Who Not How,
Okay.
um, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, who in fact didn't write the book because it's the book title, Who Not How. He had a co-author write it because Dan's not an author, right? So Dan Sullivan wrote that book, and it's like that's what gives me the confidence, at least personally, to go on this venture, even if it fails, right? Like, hey, like just most important next step. Another guy, Brandon Turner. What's the most important next step, right? Just nail it all the way down to the smallest digestible bite, take that down, and then move on to what's next. Or, as we were talking before this, maybe hire a video editor, right? Delegate. So, you know,
Blasphemy,
so.
blasphemy, blasphemy. No, I I agree, and that's coming from a line of, I guess, serial entrepreneurs to follow in your grandfather and father's footsteps. That's exciting too. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, so from an equipment finance industry perspective, we talked about how you got in the industry. Do you remember the first kind of networking event, or was it a conference that you went to in equipment finance by chance?
Yeah, it would have been, I'll say two, ACG, Association Corporate for Growth. I mean, that's been a great association to be a part of, really
Okay,
nationwide focus. Right away, I started finding multiple like-minded service providers in that space that got along really well. Right in this industry, you really build friends too, right? Like
sure. Yeah.
as you do with any industry, typically, I would imagine, because you spend the most time with them. But like, there's some really good people. So ACG for sure. And then the other one was MTA, but it was called something else at the time. But it was the Minnesota Trucking. They had a conference, so that was one of
Okay.
my first
Okay.
ones. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I
Right
just know
now it's
sometimes.
pivoted, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like some of the like the close knit relationships in this industry, where it seems like a lot of people just naturally know each other, and then kind of being on the outside and going into it, people are still welcoming and willing to let
Hmm.
their guard down and share information and everything. I think that's unique about our
Yeah.
space compared to some other uh, industries.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very tight knit, relatively, and small industry, right? Um, there's only so many people that can work on middle market companies and corporate companies and even small business companies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a niche. Yeah.
And then from being in this industry, for a little while now, some of the industry relationships that you've built. I mean, you just mentioned they're like family.
Mhm.
What has that meant to your career, Tim?
It's people that I would say when they call, like I want to pick up. Brian Slipko is really good at that, and I give him all the credit for that quote, if you will, where it's like when you call someone, you want to have you want them to have the energy, like, oh, Tim's calling, like Tim's got something, or I got to talk to Tim, right?
Sure.
And the people that I've met through this industry over 7 years now, I mean, you definitely, some people leave the industry, some people have been in it for 30 years. But whether they're new to the industry or been in it forever, I found that they're just very accepting. They're very open. Some relationships are deeper than others for sure, right? And then you're golfing on the weekends, right? You're starting to get into the personal time where it's not that 8 to 5, 8 to 6 time, but it's like, hey, what are you doing Saturday night? Let's go to the concert, like let's go to Fall Out Boy. Did that last summer. I'm like, for sure, let's go. So and then you start like, hey, let's go grab dinner with or lunch or something with the wives. Like, okay, cool, let's do that. So just ways to like do life together. Like I have a good friend, Dave Detman, that I give credit to him. I'm just a man, you'll realize, Jesse, that just borrows and steals from people. But I love
Hey,
quotes and they just drive me, right? Like, yeah.
hey, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You
So
gotta.
yeah, Dave Detman's like, hey, like let's just continue doing not a lot of people like let's work together. It's like, no, let's do life together, right? Like let's share investment opportunities. Let's share business opportunities. Let's share equipment opportunities, right? Like let's do life together, you know.
Yeah,
That's what we're doing,
no,
whether it's 8 to 5 or 5 to 8.
no, same page. So people getting into this industry, Tim, what advice
Mhm.
would you have for a person just getting into equipment
Yeah.
finance?
Do it, jump in and just meet people. I think just ask questions, like ask to take people up to coffees. If you're just starting out, like my recommendation would be to go to coffees and recommend coffees versus breakfast or lunch, right? Because breakfast and lunch can get a little bit spendier, right? Whereas coffee, not only is a little bit more financially reasonable, you can also get to know each other in a quicker amount of time versus sometimes having forced conversation too, right? Sometimes you'll meet someone and they're great, but you're not going to cross paths with referral partners. So I would recommend getting out there, meeting people, shaking hands, still cold call. I mean, I don't think cold calling is dead. It's tough. There's a lot of great gatekeepers, I would say, but still cold call and just get your name out there. And then most importantly, like ask to provide value, right? Like my walk away from almost every meeting is like, what's the best way I could support you, or how can I assist you in your growth? Um,
Sure.
I've gotten away from the word help. Um, like I think assist and support have stronger, deeper bonds than how can I help you?
That's interesting. It's I don't know if I've definitely not become complacent. I just can't remember the last true cold call that I've
Yeah,
made, just based on all the information, based on network, just based on the ability to get someone. Someone has to
yeah.
know somebody at this company.
Well, correct,
Um,
right? Yeah, that's the goal for sure. But when you're starting out, like no, very
oh,
few people
sure,
can vouch for you, right?
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Did
When
you
we
have
get
a
to,
specific? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we get to, being in the industry as long as myself and then as you have, then you do rely on your network, right? And that's when I referenced earlier, like your circle gets a little bit tighter, but then you have more confidence referring your prospects, your clients to other people that can facilitate those needs and vice versa, right? So, but yeah, when you're starting out, yeah, cold calling. Plus, it builds confidence. That's why I think the Northwestern Mutual model does so well, right? When everyone gets out of college, like what you get, everyone's gotten 2 or 3, 4, 5 calls from buddies from college, guys or gals. Like, where do they work? Northwestern Mutual. What are they doing? They're building a book of business, and then they end up going maybe starting their own book. It's just a great way to get out there and network.
Do you have a specific formula for success that you follow when you're making sales calls?
Mm, no, I'm
You don't
kind
have to.
of a
You,
fly by the seat of my
you have to.
pants.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
because some people are like, oh, I have to do 20, and then I get two, and then out of those two, I'll get
Yeah,
one,
you
and
could
then something
definitely
like
back
that.
into the math, right? I think math
Yeah.
shows like if you send 10 proposals, you're going to get 3 at most, right? So it is a numbers game by for, for sure. But my approach though is more so not like with the end in mind per se, but the journey. Like I love meeting people. Um,
Okay.
some people say it's a fault. Some people say it's a strength. Like I can, my dad would always say, "Is like, man, I could talk to a tree." It's like I could. Like I just love meeting people and hearing their story. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's been somewhere and done something. Um, So while I'm sitting across from the table of a decision maker, there might not be an immediate need, but how you leave that meeting and your impression can really help facilitate the growth of your career 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, right? And especially
Sure.
that decision maker could move, and they most often do move now, especially, right? They go to a different company, and so now you're not looking at one prospect, but you have two prospects, right? Not one client, but two clients possibly. So, um, yeah, and I have found when I find I'm being put into a box, I will say, we're like, okay, hey Tim, what's your best rate? Like, I'm not the guy that sells on rate. I sell on service. I sell on creativity and flexibility. I'm not a bank. So I have the ability to finance 100% of costs. I have the ability to do longer term projects nationwide. So I sell on that stuff that might be a little bit more of a focus and value add to the client versus what's the bottom rate. So I think there's a lot of business out there, and that still is hard for me, right? Because when someone asks you that, you want the business, and you're like, you know, I'll drop the rate to whatever you want, and you'll sign up. Well, you're
What does
starting
it
that
need? What does
relationship.
it need? What does it need to be? And it's
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
no, that's just
yeah.
opening up the
No,
door
you're
for.
already behind the eight ball, right? And that relationship there forward has already been set a precedent where it's, oh, Tim's my lowest rate guy, which isn't bad by any means, but like whenever anyone asks me that, Jesse, I'm like, I'm not US Bank. I'm not Wells Fargo. I'm not name your bank, right? I'm Aspire Finance, so I don't have a bunch of deposits. So they
Right.
understand that. Yeah.
However, when you call, I answer.
Yeah. Huge,
And
huge, isn't it?
this is what you get. Yeah,
Yep.
similar methodology, right? Because now I have a handful of contractors that work for me and everything else, and they're
Mhm.
just like, well, what about Alta, or what about this group, or what about that?
Mhm.
And I'm just like, look, I'm like, yeah, I don't have that experience, but when you work with one of my contractors, you also get me and my
Yeah.
network included. And
Yep.
good luck putting a dollar amount on what the value of that
Honestly.
brings
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this. And it just makes people think a little bit where it's like, huh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, to that point, I'd even extrapolate a little bit farther. When we're asking for people to introduce us to their clients, or to your point, like, hey, cold calling, I must know someone that knows them. Um, you could say that as well when someone's looking to use us for their services and support the growth of their business, whether it's your business or my business that's adding value to that company. We're, we're kind of buying someone else's times and relationship, right? So like if I ask, someone introduce me to a company, I'm relying on the relationship that those two individuals have and the time they've taken to build that relationship to be introduced, right? So
Sure.
similarly, when someone says, hey, Jesse, can you come in and help facilitate this need that we have? For sure. Yeah, here's my quote. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean? Well, you know, I, you've been in the business how long? You've spent how much time on it? You've learned and you've failed and you've grown from that. So, to your point, how do you put a dollar on that? So,
Still learning.
yeah, 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 yeah. Let me know.
uh,
They have a formula. They just
so
don't tell us. They
yeah,
need to be a prospect. Yeah,
exactly.
that's higher than the
Um,
market. Really? Is it?
do you know what you're getting? Yeah,
Right.
that's
Right.
not worth that. No, you
No.
know.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, so Tim, I ask everyone who comes on the program to give me a little fun fact about themselves. So, I know you mentioned healthy lifestyle, very active, work out quite a bit. Um, outside of work, what makes Tim tick?
A couple crazy things. So I love electric dance music, so EDM. So I
Okay.
actually, in October of 2013, October 19th of 2013, I went to a paint party, which is as it sounds. You go into a concert venue and there's white tarps everywhere and everyone's just throwing paint, and paint is being sprayed from the stage. Walked up to my wife
You
and
have goggles on, right?
oh yeah, yeah. Some people
Oh,
did,
okay.
some people didn't. Yeah. Everyone's wearing white. Yeah, it was
Okay.
I'd still go to that party if that was around. I don't It was kind of one that traveled around the US and I think it just
Okay.
kind of died, unfortunately. But I walked up to this woman and said, "Hi, my name's Tim." That was always my pickup line. "Hi, I'm Tim." Everyone worried about a pickup line, like, why don't you just introduce yourself? And I said, "Do you want to go dance?" And now she's my wife. So that was pretty cool. We still go to electric dance music shows and EDM shows, and love going to the Armory in Minneapolis. Love going to some festivals here and there if we can.
Yeah,
Um, love punk rock, like Green Day and Good Charlotte and Blink 182 and Offspring, that type of stuff. And then the other thing is I love signing up for life experiences. And I started following this gentleman, Jesse Itzler, just a crazy life story, probably 5, 6 years ago. And now he's kind of gotten pretty big. He's got an amazing entrepreneurial story with building up a private jet company at 27 years old, having no experience, and they built it up to 5 billion in revenue and sold it to Warren Buffett, right? And then they built Zico coconut water, and he's just a go get it guy, right? And so is his wife, Sarah. She owns Spanx, and I lay all that backstory because he's a guy and she's a gal that they he convinced her to let him host a half marathon at their cabin in the Georgia area. And we ran up and down the driveway. So I signed up for this, flew down to Atlanta by myself, brought a tent with, slept on the grounds, ran up and down the driveway, 400 feet elevation each time, and ran a half marathon with 100 people I didn't know, and came away with friends that I still talk to this day. So I love putting myself in experiences like that. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got a company now based from that called All Day Running Company. And they hold something called Running Man Festival in Georgia. And I haven't been yet because it just hasn't worked out from the dates, but I will be going next year. That's my plan.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Tim. And
Yeah.
my closing question I have for you is, why should someone want to do business with Tim Olson and Aspire Finance?
Yeah, you hit on it earlier. It's doing a relationship and doing business with Tim and what Tim's learned over the years. I think our company is really well positioned to be able to, as a startup, really grow into the industrial services or industrial verticals as well as the healthcare verticals. Those are probably the two areas I see our main focus being, but of course, it will bleed into heavy construction. There are a couple industries I'm going to stay away from. But at the end of the day, it's transparency. We are looking for not an opportunity at just a transaction, but truly a relationship. To your point earlier, similar to Honor Capital and what Brian and Shay have built. And there's not a lot of that out there. And I think that is really needed to be able to facilitate not just the deal and the need at that time, but to
Sure.
facilitate the growth of that company and complement their bank partner, right? Us non-bank lenders rely heavily on the banking relationship so that we don't get in the way of that banking relationship with the client, right? When it comes to their covenants and all that jazz. So just a company that's going to truly revolve around transparency, um, in just building relationships. Like if it's a one-off
Awesome.
deal RFP, like that's not my space, right? We all know our space and where we're best suited to spend our time. And
Sure.
building a relationship with a company that's a couple 100 million revenue that's doing X amount a year in capex, like that's where I want to play. If it's a one-off equipment RFP for a $500 million company, I'd rather go with the other one probably, just to have that
Perfect.
relationship.
Perfect. Same page. We think a lot alike. Um, Excited. Thank you for taking the time to be with me this afternoon,
Yeah.
man. Excited to see, your career trajectory still go like this, and for the future of Aspire Finance, Tim. So thanks a lot
Awesome. Well,
for
thank you for
joining
this
me, man.
opportunity. Really appreciate it, Jesse. It's commendable. I said it off record. I'll say it on record, man. It's commendable. You said this is the 211th episode or so. I mean, man, just the fortitude and the commitment to yourself to start it, see through it, and continue it. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I owe a lot to friends in this industry and just the equipment finance industry. So, uh, can't wait to keep growing this space, man, and
Yeah.
see where things go from here. But next
Love
time
it.
I'm in Minnesota, I'll definitely look you up. Um,
Yeah.
but appreciate your time today, Tim. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jesse.